The Supreme Court gave DOGE access to sensitive Social Security data. I wanted to talk about this because, I'm of an age when we were more used to privacy. So privacy is important to me. Not that we really have that much privacy anymore because we've been taught to give it away liberally, but let's see. The court's decision allows the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, to have full access to personally identifiable information in the Social Security Administration database. And the court also blocked a judge's order requiring DOGE officials to testify and produce records to a watchdog group. So the information that they were given, the disputed data includes Social Security numbers, addresses, birth and marriage certificates, tax and earnings records, employment history, and bank and credit card information. Now, I don't know. This is just my opinion. I really do want to know what you think about it, but it seems to me like this could be laying the foundation for a social score. And that's what makes it imperative for you to actually have wealth outside of the system. We saw what happened in Canada with the perfectly legal trucker strike, and then all of their accounts were, boom, shut down. So the strategy that we employ, the sound money strategy, is built in layers. And part of that layer is having the cash, right? Because outside of the system, in your possession, that's your very first line of defense, because that is what most people are going to more recognize. But we're also seeing something really interesting that's happening in England, and that is more people are taking out and holding on to cash because of the global uncertainty. And even though it kind of seems to have calmed down a bit in some ways, it's really not calm at all. Don't get me wrong. I can see advantages to a lot of this stuff, but I can also see the disadvantages. And so really what you want to do is balance that out and get yourself in a position where it doesn't matter whether you're right or wrong. A layered approach with cash as your first line of defense if they cut you out of your bank accounts, and then you go into silver or fractional silver as your second line of defense. And those, that line of defense could also, that's where a lot of the, services like Kinesis and Glint could work in that first line of defense, as well as gold backs, right? This is where I see all of those things in the very first line of defense. Then we move on to sustaining your standard of living. That does include barterable silver, barterable gold. And also we want to protect any fiat money wealth that you've got inside of the system. And then position yourself to take advantage of the opportunities that always present, like I showed you last week about what's happening in Turkey. So they sold their cars and houses to buy gold, and now it is definitely too soon. But they're selling their houses and they're selling their gold to buy houses and cars. It's definitely too soon, but at least it does show you that full circle moment. If you haven't watched that video, you want to make sure and go back in and watch it. After the revaluing of gold, will the stock price and fundamental value be the same? Well, yes and no. Okay, so the revaluation of stocks, yes, because the any of the purchasing power value that yet remains in this will be burned off. And so what we see is the stock market plunge overnight as gold rises in that revaluation. So you could absolutely say that, yeah, stocks are now going to move to fundamental value because that's what's happening with the dollar. It's moving to its true fundamental value. Any illusion above that is inaccurate. So in that case, absolutely. Now, the first overnight revaluation, though, is not really likely to take gold or silver to its true fundamental value. Globally, on average, we see those overnight revaluations happen at least 3 times. It could be more than that. It could be less than that. I don't know. I mean, Venezuela and Zimbabwe are on their 6th overnight actually 7th overnight revaluation for Zimbabwe, because they did it again in October, and they did it to install the Zimbabwe gold, which has not proven to be gold because it is pegged and not backed. And it was digital only. You could never take possession. And I'm telling you, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. So that's why you hear me harping on redeemable gold. And maybe I'm just shouting into a void, but if enough people if we demand redeemable gold, that means and I don't care what the percentage of gold is in the currency, because frankly, personally, I would gladly give up the fiat money. That has no value to me, but this does. So for redeemable gold, whatever percentage, 40%, that's what they did when they first instituted and legalized the Federal Reserve, 40% gold backed from 100% gold backed. But then they keep whittling away and whittling away and whittling away. But I will tell you that I would much rather have this in my possession and know that if I don't like what the government or the central banks are doing, I can demand to have the gold shipped to me. That makes all the difference in the world, because that's the way that we hold the toes to the fire. So yes on the dollar and dollar denominated assets, no on gold and silver on the first go around. And let's see, what have you heard about all the new digital coins being pegged by gold? Look, a pegging is not a backing, because you can't take possession of it. They can continue to manipulate that market. And there is a reason why they want you to think that this is gold. What is that reason? Confidence and trust. Because even though we've been taught away from this, we still have it in our vernacular. Good as gold, the goose that laid the golden egg, the golden rule. And these representations prove that point. Why aren't they green like dollar bills? Because they need your confidence. So, it is, pegging doesn't mean caca. It just doesn't mean caca. I don't care about the pegging. But yeah, what have you heard about it? I'm telling you that this is true. Pegging just means that they can manipulate the visible spot price, and then that's what you're going to. ETFs are pegged to gold. But what do? They sell off on a daily flipping basis gold to pay the ongoing fees. So do you own gold? No. You own shares in a trust. You own something that you perceive is as good as gold. But I've shown you many times how those fees erode that principle, and all that really is pegged to a manipulated spot market, and it's about them accumulating their fees. I read that statement and wondered if it was pure speculation at this point. Yes, it is. Look, I'm just waiting for the test. This stuff has not been tested. I'm waiting for the test. Who is going to survive? I can't really answer that. I can speculate on who's going to survive, but we're going to have to see actually who's going to do it. So yes, pegging means caca. It doesn't mean anything. Must be redeemable, must be backed. And they can't say backed if it's not redeemable. They will, because that's how they're going to want you to think. Just like Zimbabwe did. Excuse me. They said that the Zimbabwe gold dollar was backed by gold. but it wasn't redeemable, and you couldn't even get the bills in physical form. Nothing was physical, and that's what enabled them to do that 44% overnight devaluation last October. I hope that reveals the lie, because it certainly did to me, but I might be a little more skeptical. And Douglas Travis asks, when states allow silver and gold to pay for goods and services, isn't that just a covert way to confiscate people's metals while at a low price? It could be, and I'm not saying that is absolutely out of the question. If that gold and silver does not come back into circulation, then that is indeed the case. However, we have to also get it's a balancing act, because we also have to get the states to legalize gold and silver. And there's a big test in the power of the states that's happening right now in California. And I'm not getting political about this, but I think we all need to pay attention to what's happening there, because the state's job is to support the individual. The federal government's job, and I'm talking about in the Constitution, was to support the states, whose job was to support the individual. That has been turned on its head, not just now. I mean, that's been shifting for a very long time. Really, that started in 1913, and now it's flip-flopped. And everything seems to be about supporting the federal government. So it is critically important for the states, and it's not just allowing silver and gold to pay for goods, but removing that taxable event, because that taxable event is part of the tools that they use to keep people away from actually holding gold and silver. So it's way more complicated than a covert way to confiscate people's metals. And I don't think the price really matters, because is it really a big deal if they do this? I mean, they've done it for everything else. They've done it for less. So, I think it's more about getting this legalized and putting pressure. For me, it's about putting pressure on the federal government. But another great way to do it is just by converting this garbage into sound money. And Eldon Elder asks, thanks for the answer to my question. It still seems strange to value gold using dollars. I agree with you. 4,600 times zero is still zero. So is 10 trillion. And that's why you wouldn't want to convert it back into dollars unless you needed to do so to conclude a transition into an income producing asset that you can't outlive. So you're not going to do it now because you know it's going to lose value. And when the hyperinflation becomes really apparent, then people are seeing that value being lost really, really rapidly. So as we execute this strategy, this is a long-term strategy. This isn't a short-term, day-to-day thing. That's why it's built in layers, so that when things happen and you need some cash, you have some cash, right? When things happen and you need some barterability, you got some barterability. But yeah, it is strange using dollars or euros or yen that we have accepted as money when truthfully, they're not even pieces of paper mostly. It's decreed money by governments that all they really want to do is control you more and more. And you're 100% right. In fact, 10 trillion times zero is still zero. That's why watching the stock market go up or the crypto markets go up, it's an illusion to keep you suckered in. I'm saying it's far more important to understand the true value of those assets, which dollars, the Federal Reserve, I've shown you a gazillion times, zero, big fat goose egg. So anything that you can only convert into that, yeah, it's a big fat goose egg. But if the government requires you to pay for property or pay your taxes or whatever in their junk, then you convert this into that and pay it. But it'll be boom, boom. You're not going to convert it and then hold it because of exactly why you said, Eldon. Exactly why. And that's why it's so important to be properly diversified. And because we're so clear on what the fundamental value is of gold and silver, whatever you're going to hold inside of that system, this is how much gold you need to make sure that that's protected. That's a what if I'm right and what if I'm wrong, right? You want to be in a position where it really doesn't matter whether or not you're right or wrong, because then you don't have to worry about anything. You can sleep at night, you're good to go. Because I know the cryptocurrencies are not going away, but don't just volunteer. Become your own central bank, and let's really move this sound money movement forward. Locally, but globally, we have to come together. Call us, have that conversation. We'll meet you where you are and give you all the support that we possibly can. And until next we meet, please be safe out there. Bye-bye.